Hey everyone, and welcome to Princess Gay. I'm your host Connie, and today we are reacting to episode 4 of One Piece LA because I have no self-control. And I both like and hate that I'm kind of led to this because I like it because I want to watch more and I'm this invested in the series. But on the other hand, I've mentioned before that I don't like the entire binge model. I think that it hurts shows overall and it hurts retention of shows. I prefer weekly releases because it allows for better retention, better viewership. It keeps people coming back and gives you overall more to look forward to, more time to think about shows. If you binge a series, you're not going to catch anything. You're going to have trouble focusing on it a lot. I mean, I have to rewatch the series a lot with reactions just to be able to catch everything, because I'm not going to be able to catch everything in my first viewing because I'm just rushing through these episodes. I'm going through them so quickly I don't have time to really give time to them. If you have a week between, you can think about it a lot more. You can put more effort into it before you just go straight into the next episode. And part of this is, of course, I should have more self-control. This is on me. I should hold out a week or whatnot if I want to watch it that way. But the problem with that as well is a lot of times these streaming services, especially Netflix, builds its entire thing based on how quickly people view it. If these shows aren't basically binged on day one by enough people, they're not going to succeed. And it's a horrible model. It's absolutely unfair and hurts the shows. Because it's entirely centered around money. It's entirely selfish, greedy practice that puts money above, viewer satisfaction and quality. And I know that first and foremost, these are businesses. We understand that. But if you don't put effort into satisfying your viewers, it doesn't matter. Nothing's going to matter because your shows are going to stop being watched. People aren't going to be watching if they know that they're not going to get anything from it. You have to put in effort. That's why the series is doing so well compared to a lot of other live action adaptations of anime, because there's actual effort being put into this. A lot of these other shows just try to either do their own thing too much or just don't put in the effort to, try. And because of that, a lot of these live action adaptations end up failing because they focus on the money rather than, attempts to actually make a good show based on an already existing IP. And it sucks. But I'm glad that Oda was so directly involved in this. I'm glad that this retains the vibes and feeling and style of One Piece while also doing its own thing. It can do both. The problem is most adaptions don't. But the fact that we are getting a really good one here is a big plus. And again, that kind of does add to the positive side of things with me just getting super invested. There are some aspects of this that I think are genuinely better than in the original. Buggy is a huge example of that. I think Buggy is genuinely better than manga and anime Buggy. I genuinely do. And I'm not just talking about just from this part of the story, just from the beginning of the series. No. I think that the Buggy we're seeing in this series is better than Buggy throughout all of One Piece in terms of the manga and anime, period. This is the best version of Buggy. In terms of personality, in terms of character, in terms of just entertainment. And of course, that's all subjective. It's all opinion. But I think that there are certain things and certain characters that are being done better in this. I think Garp is better in this. And I know people are going to disagree with me, but again, subjective. And I'm allowed to share my thoughts just as anyone else is allowed to share theirs. There are also some things that I don't think are as good. There are some things that I think are just as good, but not better. And I like that. I like that it's kind of a mixed bag, because it's not going to be perfect. There are going to be some things that are just as good, but like in a different way. Like, what's a good example of that? The Orangetown arc, like as a whole, not talking about Buggy, but the arc itself in episode 2 of this, I think is just as good as the Orangetown arc in the manga/anime, but it's also so different that it's good in a different way. There's a lot of things that separate it, such as in this version, the lack of Shushu and Moji, and absolutely no Richie whatsoever. Orangetown in the manga and anime had more of an emotional core to it. In this, it's just excessively entertaining, fun, and even tension-filled to a degree. Although you know, obviously, Buggy's going to lose, some of the situations that he puts Luffy in, especially the tank, it's a little tense. And again, Buggy carries it so goddamn hard. He does. But just the arc itself is while it feels very different, it's still very well done, just in a different way. And so I think it's about equal in terms of my overall feelings on the quality of it. Again, it's just expressed differently throughout what we see. And I could say the same about certain characters, like Zoro. Zoro is actually pretty different than he is in the manga and anime. He's a lot more stoic, a lot more serious. In the manga and anime, he smiles and laughs and jokes a lot more, especially around this point. And he does some of that in here, but he's definitely a lot more stoic and serious than he is in the manga and anime. But I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I wouldn't say he's better than manga anime Zoro, but I wouldn't say he's worse either. I'd say he's just as good in terms of quality of character, but just in a different way. He works for this series, for this adaptation. I feel like the Zoro we get in the manga and anime would not translate as well. Luffy is the same way. Luffy's not the same as he is in the manga and anime. Yes, Iñaki carries the same energy, the same vibes, the same idealism, and a lot of the same traits too. But he's also very different. One big thing is he's actually a lot smarter. Like, there are certain parts where it's like, oh yeah, he's kind of a dummy-dumb still. But manga and anime Luffy is a fucking moron at points. And that's not been shown with this version. Iñaki's Luffy is a lot smarter, a lot more observant, a lot more put together, while still being a goofball and everything, and still having his dumb moments. And it makes him feel very different. But also, again, because of Iñaki's performance, he still carries that same vibe. It's very different, but it's also still Luffy. And we believe it's Luffy. He feels like Luffy, despite the character actually being pretty different. And that's astounding to me. That takes real talent. And I'm impressed. Genuinely impressed by that. And so I'm very excited to see where this goes. Today's episode continues and finishes the Syrup Village arc. So we're going to get to see probably battles against Bucci and Sham. We're going to see the battle against Kuro. And the Marines are there too. Which is very different from the manga and anime. And I believe I said this last time, but the fact that this is so different in how things are playing out and all, allows it to feel very different as a viewing experience. It's like we're experiencing it new because things are happening in such a different way. But there's still going to be points here and there where it's like, oh yeah, that's something I recognize. And it's wild to me because apparently I think it was IGN who put out a review. I think it was IGN who said like this series isn't different enough to stand out. It's like just the greatest hits of the manga and anime. And I'm like watching this like, what? Did you even watch this? Like, yeah, there's definitely moments and everything, and obviously the story beats go according to the same. You got Shellstown, then Orangetown, then Syrup Village. Next, we're going to the Baratier. It's like, yeah, of course. But there's a lot about them that are different. Shellstown and Alvita before that were mostly the same, but there were aspects of it that were also very different. Orangetown was nothing like Orangetown in the manga and anime. It was very different. Syrup Village has been very different so far. Like, saying that this is just, like, too similar to the manga and anime is, like, showing that you haven't watched this, you haven't watched the manga and anime, or both. It's one or the other or both. Because it's just not true. It's not really true at all. It's an exceptionally wild and weird take. I also saw there were some people on TikTok, that I saw responding to this other TikTok. The guy they were responding to was saying like, oh, it's a shame that there's only one Asian character in this cast. And I facepalmed so hard. And all these other people I saw doing the responses were doing the same. They were like, you do know that the characters aren't Asian, right? You do know that Oda has come out and said what the real world ethnicities of these characters would be right? Luffy is Brazilian. Nami is Swedish. Usopp is African. Zoro is literally the only one in terms of who appears in this season of One Piece LA who would be Asian. The only other member of the crew after that you could say is Jinbei. And he would be Chinese. And then like all of these other characters that we see, you think Actan Morgan is supposed to be Asian? God, no. Actan Morgan, if anything, is American as fuck. You think Kuro is Asian? No. Despite his name being Kuro, he's not Asian. It's like, these characters, like, I feel like the only characters, unless it's, like, very explicitly presented to be that way, the only characters that you could really consider to be Asian are those who are from Wano, or those who are descended from people from Wano. Because Wano is One Piece's Asia, basically. It is the equivalent in the One Piece world. It's like, outside of that, it's like, you don't... It kind of comes down to the argument that a lot of people have that because it's anime, that the characters have to be Asian, and in a live adaptation they have to be portrayed as Asian. It's like, no. That's not how it works. That's honestly one of my biggest issues with the live action Full Metal Alchemist. Because it's like, oh, you're going to take characters who are very, very clearly supposed to be European, more than likely German European, and you're going to make them all Asian, when the only Asian characters in Full Metal Alchemist would be the people from Xing, like Ling Yao and Xiao Mei. or Mei Chang. Xiao Mei's the panda. Mei Chang. It's like those are the only Asian characters. Them and Ling's bodyguards and everything. It's like you're gonna cast an Asian character to play like the Ishvalans, like Scar. It's like, no, they're Middle Eastern. Like, it blows my mind. It blows my mind. And that's why I have a hard time with like a lot of these live action adaptations, because they like I understand if they're made in Japan, yeah, you're gonna usually have Japanese actors, but it just feels so off because the characters aren't Japanese. That's why I like something like this. This is a Western production that has diversity in its cast that reflects the characters. I feel like the cast should do that. It should reflect the characters, not where the series is from. One Piece does not take place in the real world. It doesn't take place in Japan. Trying to cast all the characters as Japanese would just not work. Zoro is supposed to be Japanese, though. Oda literally said so when he expressed in an SBS what their nationalities would be in real-world equivalents. His ancestors come from Wano, so Zoro would be the equivalent of Japanese. So having a Japanese actor like Makenyu play him makes sense. Luffy is Hispanic. Having a Hispanic character play him makes sense, or a Hispanic actor play him makes sense. Usopp is African. Having a black actor play him makes sense. It's just, that's these characters. They're playing to the characters. Oda directly chose the Straw Hats actors and had final approval on all the other actors and pretty much everything in this, including all the changes. So just seeing this kind of stuff, and sorry for this huge rant on this, but seeing this kind of stuff irritates the shit out of me. And I'm sorry, again, this was like almost 20 minutes ranting about this shit, but I needed to get this out. And I'm already recording a bunch of shit today anyway, so why not, right? Not like I'm worried for time. But I wanted to just say that this series has been fantastic, and last episode set up a lot with how different this arc is going to be, and I'm really excited to see Django appear in this episode. I was expecting him to appear at the end of the last episode, but he surprisingly didn't. So I'm excited to see him appear. I'm excited to see how things are different there, and how things go now that Zoro and Mary are trapped at the bottom of the well. Should be pretty interesting. In the meantime, though, thank you so much for tuning in. Let's get this started. So when the screen fades to black, pause this redirect and go to the description below. Excuse me. Follow the link to the reaction, and after you watch it, come back here to the redirect and resume play. Because after fades black, then fades back in, everything from that point forward will be my afterthoughts and will contain spoilers to the episode. So, that being said, thank you so much for tuning in, and I will see you at the reaction. And we are back, and we'll begin with spoilers in 3, 2, 1, now. So before I forget, I want to touch on this topic first. Sham. The actress who portrayed Sham in this was, and I'm going to mispronounce this last name, so I apologize ahead of time, Bianca Oosthuizen? It's Oosthuizen. I'm not sure how that's supposed to be pronounced. I apologize. But I want to talk about this because I don't think I talked about it enough in the last episode and everything. In the original manga and the anime, Buchi and Sham are known as the Nyabin brothers. They are two members of Kuro's crew who come in along with Django on the ship. Well, Django actually comes in ahead of time, but they come on the ship to enact the raid on Syrup Village and the kill on Kaya. Sham is normally portrayed as a super thin male who wears oversized clothes to hide exactly how thin he is. With the kind of like suit vest and everything on, with the bow tie and the shorts and all. The outfit that she had after like they, you know, gave up on their disguises and all was perfect. But the entire idea of like turning one of the Nyabin brothers into a female character was a very interesting choice that I by no means dislike. And in fact, I actually think that it's more interesting. Because there's on top of making Sham just more interesting as a character and making her and Buchi's relationship more, it seemed like they were more of like a couple than siblings. And I swear, at one point, did Kuro... By the way, I forgot to have the subtitles on. I apologize for that. But didn't at one point Kuro, like, what did he say? He, like, called them inbred at one point. It's like, what? Okay. But they very much came across as more like partners than actual like siblings in this version. Bickering partners who would get on each other's nerves, but partners nonetheless, and not just because of the gender change. Just from their vibes with each other, I feel. But Sham being gender bent for this makes it kind of made her feel more interesting, made her feel more unique, and made the crew more interesting too, to have all the only members of the crew that we have being Kuro and the Nyabin partners. We didn't get Django at all. In fact, let me look this up. No, I don't want, just in case there's spoilers, I don't want to. But Django has a wanted poster in this. We see it, like, kind of covered by other stuff, but we see partially. We see it in Shellstown, and it was revealed beforehand, but he wasn't in this at all. I don't know if they were just worried about how they would execute the hypnotism angle, or the entire chakrams as weapons thing, but they just did not include him at all. And I mean, there's other differences too, but that's like really interesting. I guess you could say in the long run, Django isn't like exceptionally important, so it doesn't take too much to remove him, but neither are the Nyabin brothers in the original manga and anime. They're not like exceptionally important either, but they were kept in. Django felt more important than them, so it's really odd. And there's other characters like I don't expect to be in this. Like, I don't expect Johnny and Yosaku to appear at all. I just don't see it happening. Or probably Full Body. I don't think he's going to appear right before Baratier. I just don't see it happening. But it's like certain characters, I can't really see. It feels weird to not have them there. And I'm not saying this like as like some kind of big fault with the series. Like, I know there's some people out there who would probably watch this and see that there's no Django and be like, oh, well, show's ruined. You take out a character like that, the show just falls apart. It's like, no, it doesn't. It's not that big a deal. Because, one, we expect the changes. The changes are going to happen. It's necessary for the change in medium. And two, it's like, as long as it's still good, then everything's fine. I had one small issue with how this episode was handled, though. I feel like they did cut out a bit of Usopp's bravery. At the end of Syrup Village, Usopp showed a shit ton of bravery, standing up against Kuro, standing up for Kaya, protecting them, putting his health and safety and all at risk. I feel it would have been better if he had come out of hiding when Kuro was marching around the room and attacking everything. I think it would have been better if, instead of just shooting once at Kuro, he had come out of hiding and tried to attack him, maybe with a hammer or something. You know, other tools that Usopp typically uses. Even if he got beat down because of it, obviously we know he can't get beat down to the same degree that Usopp does in the manga and anime, because it would not work in live action. Like, if Usopp in live action faced the same amount of damage that he tends to in the manga and anime, he would die. It would be absolutely no way to make it believable that he would be able to survive. So I understand they have to cut like some of that kind of stuff out, but he could have stood up to him at least a little more. Like, maybe he stands up to him like right before Luffy comes in, and right before Kuro can attack and kill Usopp, Luffy interrupts. That would have been a good way to do it. Instead of having Kaya and Nami come out. Like, I understand the point of having Kaya be a lot stronger in this and being a lot more courageous herself. That's a great idea. But it does take away a lot of what made Usopp so amazing from the start, in my opinion. And this is a small issue. It doesn't ruin it for me, because Usopp still feels like Usopp. He's still fantastic as a character. We get to see so much greatness in him here. But it is a small issue that I feel like it just would have been better. It doesn't take away as much as it just would have been better. It's just because I am a fan of the anime and everything, because I do know how this normally goes. So I can't completely remove myself from that. I just can't. I have to, at least to some degree, think about it. So it's going to be brought up. It's gonna happen. But yeah. So again, it doesn't take away. I just feel would have been better if Usopp had had more, at least one more moment to stand up for Kaya and all. But then there's also the big change at the end. In the manga and anime, the crew finds out that Garp is Luffy's grandfather in post-Enies Lobby, which Helmeppo and Kobe are there for as well. Post-Enies Lobby, the post-Water 7 part of the arc and everything. At that point, we have a lot of revelations. That's also when it's revealed that Dragon is Luffy's father. Garp is there talking to them and reveals all this information, and that's when they find out that he's Luffy's grandfather. And it's like, oh my god, Luffy's grandfather is the legendary hero Garp? His father is the leader of the Revolutionary Army, Dragon? It's like, what the hell is Luffy? Who is this person? We've known him for so long, but holy cow. It's like that kind of just wild, shocking moment. And in this, because Garp is introduced so much earlier and is actively, like, hunting them, we also have the aspect of, well, if he's going to be actively hunting them and interacting, yeah, that's going to come up earlier. It just makes sense. It's very different, though. It was so unexpected. Like, I was kind of feeling like Garp and the Marines were always going to be like one step behind. But instead, they just catch up. And Luffy ends up seeing Garp on the ship and he's like, Grandpa? And they're like, excuse me? And it's just like, oh, all right, we're doing this. Again, I'm not against it by any means. I'm just surprised. Also, Kuro just got away. I think he got away in the manga and anime. Because we do see him later on when Luffy gets his first bounty and everything. And I think he was shown in a cover recently. Like, just recently. I think he was shown in one of the cover stories. For the first time since Luffy got his first bounty. It's like, oh, you're just going to show him again out of nowhere. All right. I don't know all the details. I just heard about that on social media. But yeah, it's I don't even know what happens in the cover story. I just know he was shown. It's literally just that. But yeah, so he's gonna get away. I thought like Garp was looking at him, but no, he was looking because they saw the Going Merry and all. So Usopp, we saw made his flag, which was in the manga and anime. I assume maybe at the start of the next episode, maybe just after they escape the Marines, is when he's going to make the actual Jolly Roger that they tend to carry. Because he does do that. He is an artist. Usopp is not just an expert marksman. He's kind of a jack of all trades. He's good at a lot of different stuff. Like, later on in the series, he makes Nami's climb attack for her. He's an inventor. He's a botanist after the time skip. He's obviously a marksman. He's an artist. You see this a lot, even outside of just like painting and stuff. You see him like make snow sculptures and stuff. And it's just like the dude is multi-talented. Just randomly out of nowhere at times too. It's actually like almost like a gag, but is also just extremely impressive. So it's going to be interesting to see more of his interactions. I love the entire argument over who's captain at the end there. It's like that's about right. And the fact that it actually made Nami and Zoro laugh was a great touch as well. The fights were pretty good. In fact, very good. Zoro taking on the Niaban partners was fantastic. A lot of great choreography with that. While Luffy versus Kuro was a lot more methodical and a lot more how would I put it? What's the word? A lot more psychological, I guess you could say. With Kuro kind of taunting and playing around with Luffy at first, only to then, be kind of caught off guard by Luffy listening. Kind of maybe a little hint at observation hockey. I always thought that, because in the, I talked about this briefly in the reaction, but let's talk about it here. In the manga and anime, Kuro has this attack called Out of the Bag. It's where he uses his extreme speed, his pussyfoot maneuver, and attacks blindly. He lets go of all of his emotions, all of his focus, and he just attacks blindly. He goes so fast and so uncontrolled that he'll even attack his own pirates. Luffy can't see him and can't tell where he's going to go next. No one can. Not even Kuro knows where he's going to go next. But Luffy, out of nowhere, just suddenly stops and focuses and then attacks him where he's going to be and manages to succeed. And it's like, I always kind of thought, going back on that episode after Haki was introduced and everything, it's like, could that maybe be retconned into viewing that as a little hint at observation hockey? Because we know, again, at this point in writing the manga and all, Oda didn't have Haki created yet. That came in later. But we also know that when Shanks scared off the Sea King, we know that ends up being retconned into being the color of the Supreme King, aka Conqueror's Haki. So we know that ended up being the case. And we even get to see, we even saw in episode 2, when he used that it was very clear that he was using Haki. It made it very clear that's what was going on. That wasn't originally the case when it was written, though, so I'm wondering if it's kind of the same thing here. If Luffy stopping and listening ended up being observation Haki, just without knowing it. That, like, Luffy somehow accidentally accessed it way earlier without trying. It's an interesting thought, and I've talked about it with some friends before, and it's a fun idea. I don't know if that ever had been, like, thought about by Oda, like, looking back on it, but it's a fun idea, at least. Because even, like, in Skypiea, there was Haki before it was Haki, although that one was obviously much more direct. The mantra that NL and his men, and even Isa, I want to say her name is, all of them have, the mantra that they have is observation Haki. That's more directly known. That's more directly obvious. The only reason they called it mantra is because they didn't know what Haki was at that time, because they were living in the Sky Islands and had no connection to the lower world outside of people sometimes coming up. They didn't know what Haki was, so they called it mantra. They had their own name for it. And that was still before Haki was even introduced in the first place, but at that point, Oda might have thought about it more and just hadn't introduced it into the story yet. I don't know for sure, but it's an idea. I did talk briefly about Kaya's bravery being upped in this. And I do like that. I do like that. I feel like her being made to be, like, stronger than you think, as it said. It is a nice touch. Even if it didn't really amount to too much, besides just showing that she is strong enough to continue on her own. It's still a nice touch. Mary being actually dead is a notable change, because even later on in the manga and anime, like when Kaya finds out about Usopp's or Luffy's first bounty, she sees Usopp in the background of the picture on the bounty poster. And she points that out, and Mary is there, and he's like, oh yeah, I guess that is him. It's like Mary is there. Mary does survive in the manga and anime, so... But the big difference was also that Mary was, like, sliced across the chest. Like, just sliced like that. In here, he's stabbed through the back and out the front of the chest. It's a very different type of injury. So, it's a weird decision. It's a really odd decision. Again, it's not bad. It's not bad at all. Just a surprising choice to actually have him die. Like, for good. I already mentioned in the reaction and everything that Sham's actress was also very attractive. And especially in costume. Like, I mentioned, I was kind of into it. Like that entire kind of thing, like the entire kind of, like, cat thing isn't always my thing, but it kind of worked for her. And I'm just like, I'm kind of conflicted, because you're a terrible bad guy, but I'm kind of into you. Is this how most people feel about Crocodile? Because I never felt that with Crocodile, but a lot of people are really into Crocodile, weirdly. Is this the same kind of feeling that they usually have? Because because I'm definitely having that with Sham here. Like, girl pulls off that outfit really well. Her and Bucci were also very different characters too. Like in the manga and anime, Sham kind of came across as like a cowardly little loser at first, but after he kind of revealed his full abilities and all, was kind of shown to be like a tricky, kind of creepy dude. While Bucci was always kind of like the dumb muscle, and in this, Bucci is a lot smarter, a lot smarter. And the entire chef thing that he has going on is a really interesting little trait. While not as tricksy as her manga and anime counterpart, Sham tends to be in this more sassy. Like, she's a sassy cat. She's always sassing about Bucci and everything. But still, like, both of them are super loyal to Kuro, obviously. It's still just weird that Django wasn't in there. Now I'm kind of wondering if Geen is going to be in there at all, or if they're just going to have Don Krieg. Geen was so important to the story, though, for the Baratier arc. Obviously, don't spoil me. Do not tell me one way or the other. But I'm just kind of curious now. I really enjoyed this nonetheless. I had an absolute blast with this episode and with this two-parter, I guess you could just call it, of the live action. I thought it was a great adaptation. It changed things a lot, and in good ways in a lot of cases, most cases. I really enjoyed the changes. But tell me in the comments below, what did you think of this episode of One Piece LA? Let me know your thoughts, and for now, I'm Connie, and I'm signing off. See y'all next time.